Hello, good evening, and welcome to That Millwall Podcast, where we are joined by Stuart Renle from All Things Sky Blue, who's going to take us through a little bit of an insight into Mark Robins, who is being linked by many betting outlets, many football outlets, that he could be in line for the Millwall job, as we know that Neil Harris is going to be stepping away from the club after coming back in February and doing a brilliant job. And Robins is one of them names on the list. Excuse me. And we're just going to get a little bit of a deep dive into that with Stuart. So we'll dive right into it.
Yep.
We won't cut any corners. As I just said, look, Stu, Neil's going to step down. He's done a fantastic job at the club, kept us up last year. There was some rumours floating around that, he didn't really agree with the direction, not so much the direction, but the way it was handled. We want to buy young, sell high, a lot of potential. He come in as a head coach, not a manager. So some issues around being involvement in the transfers and things like that. But how would that lay with someone like Mark Robins? What was it like at Coventry, his involvement with the board, transfers, that sort of thing? Could he fit into that role as a head coach as opposed to a manager? And does he like bringing youth through? Is that sort of his thing?
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting, to be fair, because, it's when he first came, he had, I can't remember the name of the first assistant manager that he had, but he had to go for personal reasons. And then he got Adi Vivash in. Now, a lot of people along the way of his Coventry, the 7 years that he had at Coventry City, a lot of people were saying that Vivash was the brains behind the things that he was doing tactically, and he was very much a manager. He was managing everything, and AD was on the training field, if you like, and coaching the players. Now, fast forward, 6 years or so, and we got Dennis Lawrence in. He left just after the Wolves game in the FA Cup last year. And everything kind of not spiraled out of control, but we started to see a little bit of a pattern developing in terms of we were losing games, we were leaking goals, we were still up and around there. And then obviously at the end of last season, there was some sort of issue between Adi Vivash and Mark Robins. Something had gone on. Doug King came out in his fans forum after he sacked him from us. And it was kind of, I don't want to do Mark Robins a disservice because he's been a great manager for us, but there was kind of inklings that he wasn't tactically minded. If you want a manager or a head coach to make you stable, to play you good football, Mark Robins is your man. It will be interesting if he does come, if he's allowed to bring his own people and who he brings. Because like I said, if there was a falling out with AD, I can't imagine it being AD following him. So it will be somebody else. So who that somebody else is, I'm not too sure. And it's a little bit of a weird one, really, if I'm honest, that he's been linked so soon, especially so heavily as well with yourselves being in the Championship. He will bring youth through. He does like playing youth. And, he can spot talent. He helped Vic on his way. But again, people will argue, was that Robins or was that AD that was helping him along? It's a little bit of a weird one, really. But he will get on with the board. Look, we coped with Sisu for what, 5, even maybe 5 years longer. Longer. And he didn't have much to spend. And he still got us to where we did now. Yes, he started, when we were in League Two. Let's face it, we were getting relegated that year anyway. That he'd come back for his second stint, but it will be interesting to know what he's like from being in the Championship straight away with a club that he he doesn't know from the ground up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's interesting that you say he'll work to bring the youth through, and he likes to do that. He's open to doing that because that's the route that we've gone down now. We're sort of going into that modern style of football where it's youth first, bring some talented guys in. They might not be well known, it could be hit and miss, but it's nice to hear that if he was to get the job and it was Mark Robins in the dugout, that he would be open to bringing them players through. He wants to progress like that. That's good. The other side of it is that Millwall is a traditionally old school fashion football club.
Yeah.
It's a very tough place to go and play football at times down the Den. There's a unique pressure at the football club from the fan base, especially if you're not one of our own, if that makes sense. I get that is the case at most clubs, but Millwall's pretty much renowned for having that. Is he someone that can deal with that sort of unique pressure and be able to talk to the fans like in his interviews? How was his interviews like? Is he open and honest? Is he very reserved? Or is he someone that would snap back at the fans of such if fans sort of got on his back about things?
Yeah, again, another interesting question, because in the past he's made comments about the fans when we haven't been happy with things. Not necessarily snapping as such. But this was towards maybe the end of his, Coventry time as well. So maybe the pressure got to him. Look, Robins has had to deal with so much, from being with Sisu and having literally no money and selling our better players, to ground sharing at Northampton, Birmingham. We had to go to Burton for one game, not being able to play at your home ground for so many games. I think that brings an added pressure, and it's definitely a different pressure, with coping what's going on behind the scenes than coping with fans being on your back, maybe from word dot, but I think with Robins, like I said before, if you want stability, if you want to make progress gradually, because it probably won't happen overnight. And I think that will be the case with any manager or head coach that you get in, that it won't happen overnight. But Robins will definitely make you more stable, 100%. I've got no qualms about that. Whether, obviously there was question marks over Coventry, whether he could take us to the next level. But just like we have with Lampard, we've given him a 2.5-year deal. I would imagine if Robins came in now, it would be pretty much the same. And within them 2.5 years, like I said, if you want the club to be stable and progress in a more natural way, I suppose, with bringing players in, whether it's youth, he does like youth. He does like to bring, he brought Josh Eccles, that's been with the club from the age of 7 into probably a stable championship player. Whether he can progress to the next level, I think that's for the next manager, Lampard, to do. Not Robins. But yeah, look, he's brought in, like I said, he's brought in youth before. He likes youth. And again, it's hard because of the reasons why he left Coventry might not be the reasons why you want him. He might not be a good fit. And that's, taking us to the next level. But that's not to say that he wouldn't do it with, if he's backed and, he's talking to the right people in place in terms of the people that he wants to bring in as well, because he will have that. He will bring his input. He will want to bring his own people in. I'm not saying that he's going to come and bombard Coventry for ex-players who wanted to play with him as well, like Bidwell. Obviously, Bidwell's of a certain age. He's been around the block. But again, not necessarily this year, but in previous seasons, he's definitely been a 7.5 out of 10 every week. You knew what you were getting. And Robins kind of likes that as well. So I think he'll bring a blend of youth and experience to the side, and he will make your current players probably better because of the coaching. But again, it's interesting to see if he does get the job, who he brings in as his number 2. Because if he brings AD in, then kind of what was happening behind the scenes at Coventry was a lie.
Okay.
So if he doesn't bring AD in and he brings somebody else, then that kind of rings true in what happened behind the scenes at Coventry City. So on Coventry City's side of things, it will be very interesting to see if he does get the job and who he brings in as his number 2.
So just remind us then, Stuart, for those that don't know the full reasons why Mark Robins was let go. You know, he's had a really good, successful career with Coventry. He's a very, very good manager, in my opinion, in that Tony Mowbray, Neil Warnock bracket for me. What was the main reason that he left Coventry, or was ultimately sacked? Was it was a mutual agreement to part ways? How did that unfold? What was the biggest reason behind that?
I don't think it was mutual, if I'm honest. Doug King did a fans forum, so I'm not speculating or speaking out of turn or anything here. I went to the fans forum and I got it from the horse's mouth. So basically, what happened was, at the start of the season, obviously we lost Dennis Lawrence, one of the first team coaches, and he left, and then there was a few issues off the field, apparently, and nothing quite seemed right towards the end of the season. We fell off, but we were just putting it down to the cup run, because obviously we had a brilliant cup run, got to the semi-finals.
Yeah.
And then at the start of this season, something happened, and then all of a sudden, AD Vivash left. So obviously Mark Robins then... there was an advert that went out in the local press and the local papers for, well, not local paper, but obviously a bit wider than that, for an assistant manager. Now, at the fans forum, Doug King actually come out and said that he had numerous CVs on the table, but none could cross the line. Didn't go into detail why they couldn't cross the line, but reading between the lines, either they didn't want to be a number 2 and they wanted to be a number 1, or they weren't good enough to be a number 2. So Mark Robins didn't go down that road of having a number 2, and he wanted more coaches. So we brought in George Boateng and we brought in Reece Carr, and we upgraded 2 of the under-21 coaches to come onto the first team. Now, on the sidelines, all you see then are blue coaches in blue strips and Mark Robins singular in the touchline.
So no assistant manager then?
No,
just
no assistant manager, just first team coaches. Now, again, Doug King said that, the likes of, Man City, Liverpool and things like that nowadays they have sporting directors and they have first team coaches. They don't have managers necessarily anymore. And I think that's the line that Mark was kind of going down, and Lampard coming in definitely is, because I believe that we're still looking for a technical director or a sporting director to help Dean Austin with recruitment and to help Lampard with the coaching and the coaching staff and things like that as well. So I believe that's the route that we're going down. Now, Mark Robins, Doug King thought that it would be better if we had an assistant, but again, they couldn't get one over the line, according to what Doug King has said in that fans forum. And if you go onto BBC Sounds, I'm sure it's still there and you can still listen to it now, so you can hear it from him as well, because all the sort of the draws kind of in the room, all the jaws dropped because we weren't expecting to hear what he actually come out and said.
Yeah.
And he was honest. And I don't, I'm always a trust a person before they let you down kind of thing, rather than going into the disbelief and don't believe it straight away. I believe it until I'm proven or I've heard otherwise.
Yes.
And I don't see what Doug King gets out of it if he is lying. There's nothing that he gains. He's been on Talk Sport and said exactly the same thing. He's spoken to Sky and said exactly the same thing, and he did the fans forum. So again, I don't know what he gets out of it. Again, it's only his side. We haven't heard Mark Robins' side or AD Vivash's side or whoever else's. So I can only go by, what's been said. So he wanted his coaching staff. He didn't want an assistant. He wanted first team coaches. And whether he got technically found out because maybe he isn't again, I don't want to sound disrespectful to Mark, but maybe he wasn't as good on the training field as AD was and as Dennis was. And maybe he just knitted it all together, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Again, I don't want to do Mark Robins a disservice at all because he's a legend in my eyes. I didn't want him to go, in all honesty. I still didn't. But obviously we have to move on, and I'm backing Lampard 100%.
As you should.
Yeah. But was Mark Robins good enough on his own? Does he need that assistant manager to kind of knit it all together to help him out a little bit on that training field? Questions are there to be answered, really.
That's really interesting because I peg, and I'm sure most of us do, without having that information that you've just given us from a Coventry perspective, from seeing it a lot more than we do. I peg Mark Robins as a very good all-round manager, and when you hear something like that, it definitely puts things into perspective that, maybe that quite possibly was. Is that the fact that he was a manager and he felt like he needed a bit more control? Would he adapt to a head coach role? Because remember, we're advertising for a head coach, not a manager, because of our new style of recruitment. This new guy's not going to have the biggest say in transfers. They'll be spoken to and they'll be involved as such, but not as much as Neil Harris liked to have done as he had been in previous. Is Mark Robins someone who struggles with that type of power, or would he be happy with a head coaching role and to just focus on the team and maybe perhaps give his list of potentials that could fit his team and let everyone else go out and do the job for him? Or does he like to be hands-on?
Well, history would say that he likes to be hands-on because he's worked that way for Coventry City for 7 years, and he's took us from League Two, Wembley 4 times, all the way up to the Championship and on the brink of the Premier League with a penalty kick away. Yeah. So history would say that he would want to be a manager, not necessarily a head coach. I don't think it worked out for him as a head coach but he had such a short time of being a head coach that it's still up in the air, Yes. History would say that he would have got us out of the situation that we were in when he was let go. But again, history would say that he had an assistant manager and he was manager, and that's what he got out of past indiscretions and tight places. So it's, again, this is me being completely honest, and I don't want to sort of say, yes, he'll be the right man for you, when I don't know if he was the right man for Coventry, because again, he didn't have long enough, really. He only had August to, when did he go? November, at the middle of November, towards the end of November. So what's that? August, October, November, September, October. So 3 months, three and a bit months, maybe. Yeah. It's difficult to say whether he would have been good enough as a head coach, which is the route that Robins wanted to go down. Doug King wanted to get an assistant in for him, but like I said, they either wanted to be a number one eventually, or which is a difficult position for anybody to come in and Robins to agree on. I get why Robins didn't want somebody to come in constantly looking over his shoulder, thinking, right, he's going to take my job if I don't get. It puts added pressure on, and you don't want that. And I get that, and I understand that. But to say that there was nobody good enough to be a number two, I'm not so sure. Maybe he just didn't want to be challenged in a particular way. Again, this is my view. This is my view. I don't. Robins has never come out.
So you think he would prefer to be a head coach and not a manager then?
No, I think he'd prefer to be a manager than a head coach.
You think he'd prefer to be a manager and a head coach, which is obviously what we're we're vying for. So, you know, I imagine that the bulk of the interviewing process for Millwall is going to be laying out the way that we want to do things now, laying out the responsibilities as a head coach. So that's really interesting that may not be for him. But moving on from his background to why he's left Coventry and whether he'd be able to adapt to our style of things, let's get more about his stuff on the pitch. What, you know, ultimately gets you in and out of jobs most of the time. Talk to me about his playing style, because Millwall have been usually predominantly known as a bit more of a direct football team. Under Harrison, we've been very disciplined, all about shape, all about energy, don't beat us, hit on the counter. And under Rowett before that, it was very much defensive, try and be resolute, don't lose the game first, and then see if we can win it with a counter, a set piece, and so on like that. Neil Harris adapted slightly and brought us a little bit more technical football. He's very good on the eye. It was good to watch, and we was playing with a bit more fluidity whilst keeping some discipline shape. And we changed it against big teams where we beat Leeds, we beat Burnley, where we average around 15 to 20% possession, not many attempts, but we made the most of what we had and we saw games out. What is the style of approach for Mark Robins? Now, before you go into formations, because I'll ask you that after.
Okay.
What is more his technical outlook? You can bring formations into it, because I understand it's a difficult question to answer without doing that. But what is his play style? And is he adaptive in games? Does he adapt it to the opposition? Or is he, this is the formation and the style of football we play, and that's it? Is he, how does he approach his games?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a weird one, if I'm honest, because a lot of people will say that his in-game tactics aren't the greatest, and he can make the odd decision on the odd occasion. However, when you look back at our playoff season, for instance, we started that season with a 4 at the back. It didn't suit us. He changed to 3 at the back because the personnel that he had and he brought in suited that style of play. So then we started to play with wing backs. So in our playoff season, we had McNally, we had McPherson, and we had Doyle as our 3 centre-backs. The good thing about that system, if you like, and the way that they played, is you had Fads just sitting there with the knowledge and directing the younger 2 players. And the younger 2 players were quick enough when Fads lost it in the centre to run behind and make challenges. Now, he adapted that style. And then, was it last season? I think it was last season. We started off with the back 3 because it worked the season before. But then it wasn't working. So he changed it back to a back 4 with the personnel that he had and with the personnel that he brought in. And we started to play with the back 4. And again, you know, we started off slow, but in our playoff season, we started off slow anyway. So it's nothing new to Coventry about starting off slow. But he changed it again. So it's not like he doesn't adapt, because he does. But I think it depends on the personnel and the style that you guys sort of have adopted. He won't want to change too much if you're playing with a back 4, but he will change it. You know, he will give it time to see what he's got. And that's a good thing about Robins. He will give players chances and time. Whether he has that, I don't know. Yeah. But he will give the players that time to adapt to the way that he wants to play, and to know whether you've got, you know, 3 decent centre-backs, an older head. You know, obviously you were missing Jake Cooper. You know, Cooper at the back, Tanganga on one side and another on the other side. That could work perfectly for you if he is in there. And then January, he brings in, you know, a couple of wing backs that suits that style of play. He can do that. Like I said, his in-game tactics with Mark Robins always had a pattern, or I always felt that he had a pattern. He would go into half-time as close to 0-0 as possible. Okay. After half-time, we would always come out, and we would come out so fast it was unreal. If we were like 1-0 up or 2-0 up at half time, that was a bonus. But he would always try and get in there 0-0 if he could, or as close to as 0-0 as possible. And then second half, we would always come out so fast and we would attack so quickly and we would press. He is more of a possession manager or head or coach, and he will want to hold on to the ball for a little bit. But we would come out a lot quicker and pass the ball a lot quicker in the second half than we would the first half of many, many games. It'd always making substitutions around about 60 minutes and then maybe 75 minutes. On the odd occasion, he would throw a trump in there and maybe do something at half time. But normally 60 minutes and 75 minutes were the substitutions that he would make.
Okay, so does he adapt to his opponent? If another opponent is playing a similar formation, does he match it up, or is it, I know what I'm doing, this is what works for us? That's pretty much what you're saying.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
So what style of football would you put it down to? If you used to put a word on his style of football, you mentioned possession-based. Is that the word? Is it possession-based football? Is it a high press? Is it a counter-attacking football? Is it wing play? I'm using, silly of me, I'm using FIFA analogies, getting a pressing and things like that. But they are natural styles of play. They are styles of play that are relevant in today's game. So what style of play do you think he deploys? Like a high press or possession, counter-attack? What would you best suit him down to?
Again,
and with that as well, give me a formation. His two favoured formations. You mentioned the 4 and the 3 at the back. What are the two formations he normally deploys along with the style that you're going to give?
Okay, so the wing back formation would be 3 at the back. So it would be because he to be fair, he did on the odd occasion change it. Now it depends on the personnel, because it's a slightly awkward question, because you've got to remember Robins had us from League Two. So we've had Robins from League Two, and he's played a 4-4-2, he's played a box midfield, he's played 1 up front, he's played 2 up front. So over the 7 years, he has been out with the players that he's brought in over them 7 years as well. Because you've got to remember, the likes of Jamie Allen and Godden that left last year and Kelly that left last year, they were with us since League Two.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows the personnel that he brought in, and he knows what formation to play with that personnel, with what he's got available. So it was easier for him to change that formation, whether it's a 3 at the back or a 5 at the back, if you want to play 5, or 4 in midfield, or, switch from a 3 in the midfield to a box midfield and bring one of them down. It's a little bit harder to just pinpoint it down, because he's coming into potentially a Millwall side who will already have a style of play, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So Robins will I'm sure that will look at that, how you were playing, and he will start off, I would imagine, with playing a similar way to the way that you are now, whether that's possession-based, until he gets a feel for it. And then he'll bring his own players in, I would say. And then you will, come January, if he is appointed, come January, with the players that he brings in, you will find out what style of play that he wants to play. So if he does bring, say, wingers in, or wing backs that play wing back, he will play a possession style and counter-attacking style, if he plays with 1 up front. If in January he starts to bring in more central midfielders, you might find that he's very much more like Klopp used to do, and do the press more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that would be, say, a Hamer or a Callum O'Hare or a Victor Gyökeres, where they would press first and then everybody else would come on, because he'll be bringing more midfielders in. So he'll probably play with maybe a 4 in midfield, a box with 1 up front. And then you'd have your wing backs, and then obviously your centre backs there as well. So again, it just depends on really on who he brings in January, the type of players. If you come back to me in January or after the transfer window's closed, I might be able to answer that a little bit better on how he's going to play. But for now, it's a little bit harder because he will look, like I said, we've had Robbins. We were lucky enough to have him for 7 years, and he's brought us up through the ranks. And he's been able to bring the players in that he wants to play. Because we had Darbo at left wing back, we had Ian Matson at right wing back for Darbo, Ian Matson, Sam McCallum. We had Ryan Giles at one point at left wing back as well. So he does tend to favour the wing back position. I think it just helps him. If we need extra bodies in midfield, then the wing backs can help that position out. But again, come the end of January with who he brings in, maybe ask me that question again.
Because we typically deploy a 4-2-3-1 with a cam, 2 wide players behind a striker. We do like down Millwall a typical 4-4-2. Has he played 2 up top? Does that work for him sometimes? Does he like doing that?
I wouldn't necessarily that he likes doing it. He has done it in the past. And the players that, to be fair, that we've bought recently would be perfectly suited to how you are now. Because we bought Sakamoto, we bought Mason Clark, we bought Haji Wright, we bought Radoni. These are basically wide forwards, if you like, that would come in and play with one striker, and then you'd have your 3 at the back. So he would probably come in and suit that straight away with how you're already doing.
Oh, that's interesting. And then, so we spoke about it a little bit earlier, but personality-wise, obviously, like I did mention, we're very passionate, often very vocal about our expectations. We're very vocal about certain decisions, things like that. You did touch on it. Does he deal well with that sort of thing? How does he handle criticism from the fans? You mentioned he has snapped back a couple times. How would that go down? Is he someone that does that a lot, or does it take a lot to get under his skin? Because, from being an outsider down Mill, it's very difficult to get the fans on side. And, snapping back at the fans is enough to get any manager in hot water with the fans. What's his personality like aside from that? Like, he's in such a demanding environment, like in his interviews, things like that.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times personally, and he is such a nice guy. One of the most approachable people. He has time for everybody. Look, we were, as a fan base, we were very disconnected from Coventry City. And he was the one that galvanised us. And he was the one that Dave Boddy, and obviously the people that he brought in, just galvanised us completely. And he made us a family, and he made us what we are. So if you give him time, he will, I'm sure he will bring you the love as well, like he did at Coventry.
Very Neil Harris-like, because that's what Neil Harris was great for, galvanising the club.
Yeah, and he'll stabilise it for you. And, like I said, I've met him a couple of times, and he's such a nice guy, and he will give time for the fans and stuff. And like I said, it was mainly kind of towards the end of his tenure that he was starting to snap back. But maybe that was, Doug King had come in and, and maybe things off the field. I don't know whether I'm maybe slightly talking out of turn a little bit, but things off the field might not be going, quite right for him as well. Personally, you've got to remember we're human at the end of the day. Yeah. As much as you want to keep things away from the training field and the press box and things like that, sometimes I know I think he lost his mum, quite recently as well. So if she wasn't well and stuff, and, things get on top of you. So I'm not, personality wise, great guy, open with the fans. He'll be honest with the fans as well. He was always honest with us as Coventry fans. And like I said, he galvanised us, and he brought our Coventry City back to where we are now. So, if he's listening to this eventually, if he is a Millwall, I'm still eternally grateful for him, and eventually he will have a statue outside Coventry City.
No, brilliant, and excellent views and a great insight there. So finally, we'll end it up then. Is he a fit for Millwall?
Have I got one word at this? Yes
one
or
word.
No?
Go on. I'm going to do what you did to me, a little one worder. Is he a fit? I'll open it up a little bit more. Is he a fit for Millwall? And do you think he'll succeed at Millwall if he took the job?
Is he a fit? I'm going to say no.
Okay.
But if he took the job, I'm sure he'll be a success. And if he took the job, obviously, before the 29th of December...
I was going to mention that.
Then I hope he loses. But no, look, I'm sure if he did take the job, he would do everything in his power like he did at Coventry and like he did at Huddersfield. It didn't work out for him at Huddersfield when he left us the first time. It didn't work out for him at Huddersfield, but he came back and he was given time. I think that's the big key. It's a big key with any manager, with Lampard, Robins, wherever he ends up, it's time. Managers nowadays, unfortunately, don't have enough time wherever they are. But I think Robins has proven if you give a manager time and ride it through the tough times, then he can work wonders for you. But he's got to be given time.
No, and like you said, like any manager, and it's big shoes to fill at Millwall. Neil Harris is leaving for his own reasons.
He was a legend, weren't he? All playing career manager. Is a fan. I'm sure you'll see him on the terraces. Hopefully, if he gets over whatever he's going through at the moment.
No, absolutely, and he's decided that now's the time to walk away. He's left us in a better place. We was all but down. He is a legend as a player, as a manager as well. And as a Millwall figure, in my opinion, he's arguably the greatest Millwall figure in the club's history for what he's done for us. And he dropped everything he had at a hat and made a promise to a dead man that he would come back and save this football club. And that's what he did. So any manager coming in would be wise to pick up the phone to Neil Harris and gauge what it's like.
I'm sure he would do.
Because no one gets this club more than Neil Harris. And it's a sad day in the football club, but ultimately... visions didn't align, issues. So what we led to believe it within the back room and with transfers and things like that, we don't know the ins and outs, but that's what we're sort of putting it down to. So hopefully the new man comes in and doesn't have them issues, but that will be the forefront of the interview process, whether they will be issues. But no, Stuart, I really appreciate you at very short notice taking the time to talk to me again. We've got to stop meeting like this.
Anytime, you know that. We'll have to meet for a beer one day.
Absolutely. If I can make it to Coventry away, I'll take you up on that 100%.
Fantastic.
But lastly then, mate, I really appreciate your time. Why don't you tell us where we can find you, where we can find the podcast and what you're up to?
Yeah, thank you very much. You can find us on all social media platforms, X or Twitter, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Please go and like and subscribe. If you just want football content and you're not affiliated with anybody, just have a listen to our podcast as well. YouTube, like I said, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, like I said, all social platforms at All Things Sky Blue, and you'll find us.
Brilliant. And again, Stuart, thank you very much for your time.
No problems. Thank you very much.